Hey everybody, today I'm out in New York City taking a look at the least expensive Volvo that's going to be on sale in North America next year. This is the Volvo EX30. It's going to be fully electric, and not only is it going to be the least expensive Volvo, it's also going to be their smallest EV and simultaneously their most performance-focused EV. So let's take a look. Yep, if you want to go 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds in a Volvo with a Volvo logo on the front, then that's going to be the EX30. Of course, if you want to go a little bit faster in a vehicle that Volvo certainly had a hand designing, then you're going to find those over at the Polestar dealer. We don't know if there's going to be a related Polestar to the EX30, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was at some point in the future. Volvo's electrification direction is not just about taking the existing brand into a new electric direction. It's about redefining some of the core Volvo values and really focusing on sustainability, safety, etc. And that's what we certainly find in the EX30. In terms of design, we find a reinterpretation of Volvo's front-end design. Since obviously less cooling is required, we don't have an imitation grille up front. We have this blanked out front design, big Volvo logo right there in the center with the sash motif. Cooling happens all the way down here at the bottom of the bumper, and they've done a lot of work texturizing some of the exterior surfaces to keep this from looking too slab-sided. Since this is the least expensive Volvo, it's going to start around $35,000 plus destination. We have a lot of cues borrowed from the larger EX90, but in a more simple form. So rather than having those electrically opening, really cool LED accents on the front, these are stationary accents with the LED headlights above and below the Thor's Hammer module. If you were wondering about the future of Volvo's cross-country sub-brand, fear not, the EX30 is getting a cross-country treatment. That actually surprises me a little bit, since I kind of thought that the EX part was the SUV nomenclature anyway, and we haven't had cross-country versions of the XC90 or XC60, but of course this is an all-new electric future. We do expect to see some of the front-end changes come to North America that we've seen in Europe, but we don't have any details on that future cross-country model in terms of added capability or pricing structure just yet. One of the other interesting design cues that you can certainly see from up front is that we have these pretty wide fender flares here because we have relatively wide tires for a starting model in the lineup, 245s all the way around. This particular model is a prototype of the performance trim, so we don't have all the details yet of what the base rear-wheel drive model is going to get, but I expect it to be pretty close. Let's talk dimensions. The EX30 is entering really a new segment in North America. This is about 166.7 inches long, making it 8 inches shorter than the Volvo XC40. That means that it's not really going to compete with a Tesla Model Y or a Ford Mustang Mach-E or most of the luxury segment, but it is right around the same dimensions as the Genesis GV60. But this has much more of a traditional SUV profile than we find in the Genesis. It certainly looks like the XC40's Mini-Me from the side profile. And it's shorter in every dimension. We get about 4 inches less roof height, a little bit less ground clearance as well, about 6.5 inches on the models that we've seen so far, versus about 8 inches in the XC40. We don't, again, know what the cross-country version of the EX30 is going to be like, but let me know what you think of the design. I certainly like the lines, and I like the way that the same design language has been shortened into this slightly stubbier form. I think it really works well with the EX30. Again, I don't know all the final tire size details, but this model has a 245/40R20 on it, and let me know what you think of these wheels. These remind me a lot of what we've seen on the EX90. It does look like the aero covers might be removable, but we'll know more about that later. Design-wise, the greatest departure from the existing Volvo lineup is probably out back, where some design elements are shared with the EX90, like the split tail lamp design, where we have lights on top and then this tail light section below, which incorporates the amber turn signal. Now, are we going to get amber turn signals in the US? We just don't know the answer to that at the moment, but I really hope they come. You'll also find the reverse lights down here in this module. This has a power hatch. The button is conveniently hidden just above the L in Volvo, and there is a rear windshield wiper in case you're wondering, something that a lot of recent EVs have been deleting, but we still have one here. We also have a very vertical opening for the cargo compartment. As with the front-end design, there are a lot of different textures going on here, help dressing up some of the otherwise large expanses of plastic. So vertical stripes down here on this section. They put the parking sensors nice and low on the bumper. As you'd expect in a modern EV built on a dedicated EV platform, the EX30 will start as a rear-wheel drive crossover. 268 horsepower, 253 pound-feet of torque back there. If you want more oomph, you want the performance dual motor model, that's going to add a second 153 horsepower motor to the front to give you 422 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque combined. The interesting twist with the EX30 is that even if you choose the dual motor model, it's always going to have a strong rear power bias. And that's something that we're seeing as a change in the Volvo lineup right now. If you first drove the XC40 Recharge or the C40 Recharge when they came out, it was more of a symmetrical motor setup, but they've recently given it a healthier motor in the back. So if you drove one of those initially and you didn't like it, you might want to give one another drive. 0 to 60 times in this model, 5.1 seconds for the base version, pretty swift, 3.4 seconds if you get the dual motor model. Single motor and dual motor models use the same 64 kilowatt hour usable battery pack, sitting skateboard style underneath the vehicle, and charging happens back here behind door number 1. Now, since this is a European prototype, we do have the Menkes charge connector there for 3-phase charging. That's kind of a cool touch to see in North America, and then the DC fast charge pins below that. It's going to have an onboard 11 kilowatt AC charger, and DC fast charging speeds will peak just over 150 kilowatts. That's going to give this about a 26-minute 10% to 80% run. That doesn't sound quite as impressive as some of the competition, but it's actually a really solid charge curve, so it looks like it's going to cling on to that 150 kilowatt speed for quite some time. Now, at launch, you are going to find a J1772 and CCS charge connector over here, but in calendar year 2025, they are going to be moving over to a native NACS connector, the so-called Tesla connector. In 2024, these are going on sale in calendar year 2024, there will be an adapter available at some point from Volvo that will let you use those Tesla supercharger stations for charging. So you'll have the choice of charging really on any of the plugs that are out there in North America, with or without the adapter. We don't have official EPA range figures just yet, but Volvo is expecting that when the EX30 comes here, it's going to have 265 miles of range in the dual motor version, 275 miles if you get the single motor model. So there's really not much penalty to get a significantly faster 0 to 60 time. And that kind of fits with what we've seen from Volvo as far as improving efficiency in their electric drivetrains for a while. They've really been focusing on improving the efficiency in their dual motor models so that way you don't see quite as much of a range penalty as we used to see for choosing that all-wheel drive option box and, of course, the faster 0 to 60 times. Cargo practicality is likely going to be a big differentiator between the Genesis GV60 and the EX30. You'll notice that the cargo area is very square, and we don't find that in the Genesis. The Genesis really has more of a fastback or liftback-like profile, and that severely compromises its cargo area. Back here, we find just about 14 cubic feet of storage space, and I'm assuming that's not including what's going on under the load floor. As I usually caution when we're reviewing a new European vehicle, it's important to remember that there are a number of different cargo measurement standards around the world, and when those products are brought to North America, the standards don't always translate. So before you think this cargo area is larger or smaller than you might assume, you might want to wait till the final specifications in North America come out, but I can definitely say it's very square. And as you'd expect from Volvo, very focused on cargo practicality. There's some fixed attachment points around the vehicle for securing cargo, and then we have this 2-stage load floor, which you can drop into a lower height to maximize the storage space, or you can lift up to a height where it is level with the rear seat backs for easier loading of cargo into the rear. But now for the real practicality test, we have a hard cargo cover in here. So is there a place to put it when you aren't using it? Let's see if it fits under the floor. And yes, it actually does. Also a touch borrowed from the EX90, here on the hatch lid we have a little diagram telling you the kinds of things that you can fit in the cargo area and giving you some critical dimensions just in case you want to measure things out yourself. Bearing the price tag in mind, the rear seats fold in a 60-40 fashion rather than the 40-20-40 folding fashion like we find in some Volvos. It's time to check out the interior, starting with the seats. Let's see how the front seats feel here. The driving position certainly appears to be just a little bit more relaxed than we find in the XC40. Definitely what you'd expect in a smaller vehicle, but headroom is fantastic. If I put this seat all the way down, I probably have about 6 inches of headroom left. If you were worried that the lower roof height and the lower ground clearance would conspire to make a tighter cabin, fear not, this is still very upright inside. We do have a new way of controlling the seats. It's actually sort of a rectangular knob here. Some of the functions are going to be probably in the infotainment system. We don't have all the details there, but the seat controls feel quite intuitive. We move the seat forward and backward, up and down with that control. The lumbar support's right there in the middle, and then you tilt the seat back by rotating the knob around. With the front seats comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, there's a reasonable amount of room in the back. Again, remember, this is not just the least expensive Volvo, it's also going to be the smallest Volvo in North America. However, taller folks are probably going to be more comfortable back here than you might expect, because of the headroom. I still have about 2 inches of headroom back here. We have this full glass moonroof. It doesn't have a shade or anything like that, but legroom is acceptable, I would say, for a shorter trip. On a longer journey, you might want to put the smaller folks in the back. Scooting all the way over to the right side here, we have this seat in a slightly more forward position, still plenty of room going on back here, and lots of really elegant touches as far as the interior design goes. Of course, completely flat floor in the back also. Let's start out our interior tour talking about some of the details in the back. We have window switches and USB-C charge ports right here in the center console, and you can see that the storage area in that center console passes all the way through from the front to the rear, allowing you to put those larger items in there or to share things between the rear passengers and the front passengers. That's kind of a cool touch. The seats are upholstered in an imitation leather upholstery in this interior. We'll go over some of those interior options in just a moment, but nice touch back here. We have lots of places to storage things, little separate storage slots right there, and lots of really attractive accents on the interior. Volvo went about going for different materials on the inside, trying to, of course, reduce costs, but also improve sustainability and give this really a unique flair. So they've definitely gone off of the typical playbook that Volvo would normally use into a slightly different direction. So back here on the rear doors, we have imitation leather up top, what sort of looks like a sparkly Formica section right there in the middle, really slim door pulls, and then lots of texturing going on that lower panel. Here's a close-up look at that texturing on the door panel. It is a hard plastic, but that texturing gives it definitely a different look and a more elegant feel on the inside. We also have a nice soft touch armrest that appears to sort of float over this section in the door. Volvo's done a really good job with the industrial design in here and also the color matching. You'll notice this is sort of a robin's egg blue there, and that actually goes with the blue interior color and then the blue exterior color in this model. Moving up front, let's start with the wide angle shot so you can see how everything comes together. Unlike other Volvos, we don't have a separate instrument cluster up here. Instead, that's just the driver attention monitoring system. We then find a new attractive steering wheel with a flat top and a flat bottom. Let me know what you think of that design. The turn signal stalk and the shifter stalk are both borrowed out of the larger EX90, and the steering wheels feature a combination of touch and physical buttons. So it knows what option you've pressed by what you've touched on the button, and then it actually physically moves, giving you a haptic feedback there. The power is not on for everything in this vehicle, so I can't show you what those look like, but they are illuminated. In the center of everything, we find the latest infotainment software that we also find in the EX90 on a slightly different screen here in the center. And then we have that double binnacle sort of feel to the dashboard, where we have basically an identical design hump on the one side and on the other. Let me know what you think about that. The front door design largely mirrors what we find on the rear doors with that floating armrest and that really slim handle. And that's made possible by Volvo moving the window switches right here to the center console and doing something quite controversial, giving us just one set of buttons for the front windows and rear windows a la Volkswagen. So we have to press that rear button if you want to open and close the rear windows. Personally, I think that's a little bit silly. What's not as silly, though, is all the storage going on right here in the middle. You can see that we have a nearly flat floor. We have Qi wireless charging mat there for one device, second spot just for resting another device. Down here we have additional storage that closes off or opens up with extra color contrast going on there. And that is the one, if we go all the way through, that actually connects all the way back there to the rear passenger area. It's really a lot of thought as far as storage goes here. The center armrest doesn't open because of all that storage going on under there, and of course, that is where we find the cup holders with this slidable divider, so you can use it for storing those larger items, slide that over for your larger drink cups. You can shrink it down for just one drink, or have it all the way in to reserve all that space for your storage. The single central screen will act as the infotainment system and your instrument cluster. Up top, we basically have the instrument cluster functionality, and then below we have all of the infotainment functionality. Obviously, built-in Google Maps there. You'll also be able to add and download maps to the system. So for instance, we have SoundCloud, Waze directly on there. So if you want to use your smartphone, you can do that. Or if you want to use Waze on this system, you can do that as well. We have controls for the climate control, heated and ventilated seats, things like that down here. Over here we have certain vehicle settings, so quick access to things like your mirror functionality, one-pedal drive, speed limit warnings, etc. Some of the software is likely going to change for the North American market. This is again a European market prototype. Versus the software in the XC40 and C40 Recharge, this is definitely a next generation level of software, and I'm really happy to see that because Volvo, I think, took a little bit of a step backwards when they first went to the Google operating system, and this really seems to have addressed an awful lot of those concerns of mine. So especially things like the sound focus screens here, these are definitely much nicer done, a lot more functionality than we find in the current version. Now you might be wondering, where is the glove compartment? Well, it's not on the passenger side, it's right here in the middle of the dashboard. It swings down right there, and it does not bop the cup holder, just in case you're wondering. It is a little on the small side, so it's not quite as large as a full-size glove compartment would be on the passenger side, but it helps keep the dash really slim. Obviously, it's not dark outside, but we do get a little bit of an indication as to how the ambient lighting goes in here. You can see that it shines on that sort of sparkly dashboard component right there on both the driver and the front passenger sides. Now, fortunately, Volvo has brought over a few examples of the different interiors that we're going to get. So let's take a look at the upholstery. I think this one is the one that intrigues me the most. This is actually recycled denim. Volvo is really focusing a lot on sustainable and recyclable materials. They say that the EX30 is going to have the lowest production carbon footprint of any vehicle that Volvo has ever produced, and it's obviously going to be more sustainable and recyclable than some of their other products. This seat has an imitation leather upholstery for that bottom cushion, contrasting piping, but I really think that the star of the show is this attractive fabric. And some luxury car companies are running away from fabric still. Let's go ahead and look at some of these other chips. You can actually see some of the different materials going on next to each other. So the dashboard material, that changes. So instead of the sparkly lighter color that we found in the model I just showed you around, we get some darker colors. And then if we continue down the lineup, we of course get the wool blend upholstery that we find in Volvo's more expensive products. This is also a really cool touch that I love seeing in modern Volvos. This is made out of partially recycled and partial virgin wool. We have contrasting piping going on there, and unlike full wool seats, the reason this is a wool blend is that way it doesn't pill like an old sweater, so it does seem to hold up pretty well. And they've also given it an anti-stain treatment in case you're worried about staining and wool seats. If we move on over to this display, you can see some of the other materials that are going to go along with that wool, including a yellow Volvo EX30. Yep, Volvo has pledged to bring this exact yellow color to the EX30. So if you want to get a car with yellow on the outside and wool on the inside, there is now going to be a Volvo for that. One thing that a lot of Americans don't really realize is that Volvo's actually loved wacky color combinations for quite some time in Europe, but we usually don't get them in the United States. Over here we have another set of color combinations. You can see that that yellow exterior color is also going to be available with this interior combination, and this gives us a blend of wool fabric on the top, dyed in sort of a sage green. It's a little bit difficult to tell the color on the camera, but it's a sage green in here, charcoal on the outside, contrasting piping, and then we get just a very soft green touch to the imitation leather below. That's a really cool look as well. And then the one that was in the model we were looking at over there, it's going to come in the robin's egg, gray, silver, and black exterior colors, and that is this robin's egg, I don't know what else you'd call it, light periwinkle, something like that. This has a fabric section up here with a really interesting digital pattern that changes as it goes down there on that center back, and then the rest of the seat is again that same imitation leather product. With a starting price of just over $35,000, plus of course destination tax, title, and license, the EX30 is easily going to be one of the least expensive luxury segment EVs. Competition for this is pretty difficult to define. I guess you could say the GV60 is a competitor to this. It's built on a larger platform though, and that's why some of those proportions are a little bit unusual, because the Ioniq 5 is significantly larger than this, and that's the platform the GV60 was built on. The GV60, however, does focus on performance. You can go really, really quickly 0 to 60, and you can charge very quickly in it, but its price tag is certainly going to be higher than the EX30. And that's before we've even considered that we don't know 2024 or 2025 pricing on the GV60, and those prices have continued to ratchet up. This is not going to be built in North America. A lot of you ask about this. This model will be built in a Volvo factory in China, at least for the moment. We don't know what the future holds. Maybe production could move to North America. Maybe it could move to Europe. We just don't know. But we do know that at launch, it's going to be built in China. So if you buy one, it will not qualify for the federal tax credit. If you lease one, though, it likely will get some sort of lease incentive from Volvo. Those details have yet to be finalized. In this segment, lots of folks lease, so I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue. For some folks, really the charge speed might be a bit more of an issue, but I would say it's about similar to what we see in a Tesla Model 3 or Tesla Model Y as far as the 26 minutes from 10% to 80% range goes. And the AC charging is particularly swift. We have a relatively small battery pack and a relatively fast AC charger. So for most folks, I think that is going to be more important. Let me know what you think about the EX30, and do you have a pre-order on one of these? I have to admit here on camera today that I actually put a pre-order in on an EX30 already. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if I end up actually signing on the dotted line for my EX30 When 2024 rolls around, will we keep it for a long-term tester, or will I keep it longer term for myself? We don't know the answers to that either, as there's a lot that is not yet known. See all of you later.